is the time. Of course, I'm sure you must be waiting patiently to hear these two amazing gentlemen. Who are these wonderful people? I'm sure few of you must be knowing him, but let's know a bit more. Today's guys theme is mindset. Mindset. So let's set our mind, and it's really my pleasure, and I feel really fortunate to invite our very first speaker today, and his name is Dr. David Lincoln. Let's know a bit about who is Dr. David Lincoln, right? So Dr. David Lincoln is a master trainer of NLP and a psychologist. He trained people in NLP, psychotherapy, and any ideas? He trained people in NLP, psychotherapy, and he coaches as well. Through NLP training, guys, he in association with NLP, he run trainings all levels of NLP, NLP psychotherapy, and NLP coaching, and there's more. I mean, I always say if you want to, know more about the people, know more about this abundance in the universe, just read the books. But the better idea, just listen and meet these wonderful people. So thanks to author Sherry, who has created this platform, and we are able to, get this amazing insights. So I would suggest carry a pen and paper diary, because you never know what a particular sentence may shift your whole paradigm instantly, right? So over to Dr. David Lincoln. I really welcome to PSI community. Your time starts now. Over to you.
Thank you, and good evening to everybody. And I hope you can all hear me okay, though there is a little bit of background noise, so one or two of you probably still got your microphones on. I have 15 minutes or so to cover a subject that I've been studying all my life, so I don't know how I'm going to fix this all into 15 minutes. But let's start off right at the very beginning, and let's start talking about the mind. Now, you've heard lots of stories about the mind. You've heard lots of ways of describing the mind. There's the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind, the pre-conscious mind, this mind, that mind, never mind, and don't mind. Well, I'm here to tell you right from the offset that there is actually no such thing as a mind. If I was a surgeon and I started to cut open your head looking for your mind, I'm afraid I wouldn't find it. What I will find is one of the largest muscles in the body, which is often referred to as the brain. These 36 ounces of stuff that most of you have got between your ears. Now, there's a complication with the brain because we don't seem to be able to talk to our own brain. Well, if we do spend too much time talking to our brain, we're considered to be a little insane and probably dragged off to a local mental hospital. And yet we seem to know some things about our brain, but not very much. So for the sake of simplicity, we tend to divide the brain into two parts. The part that we know about and the part that we don't know about. And in the NLP community, we tend to call those parts the conscious and the unconscious, or subconscious. Those two are the same meaning. Now, first of all, I'd like to give you a little thought about how the brain works by a little story or a metaphor. Now, I always use this as what I call the library model of the brain. Now, you're all familiar with a library. A library is a building that contains thousands, if not millions, of books. And you can go into that library at your leisure and you can read a book, and maybe two books, and maybe three books. I don't think you can read them at the same time. I think you'll find you can only read one book at a time, or a bit of one and then a bit of another, because your brain can only work like that. So if you consider your brain as the library and the book that you're currently reading as the conscious mind, that will give you some idea as to how the brain works. The brain primarily is there to serve you. It's there to keep you alive. It's there to make sure that everything works very well. Now, we have the late and probably not so great Sigmund Freud. You remember Sigmund Freud. He was the drug addict womanizing psychiatrist of the late 19th century, to thank for this terminology that has become quite popular throughout the world. But of course, it's not true exactly the way it is. It's the only way we can describe the metaphor of the workings of the brain. Now, what makes things even more complicated is that the way you get this information into your brain is through what generally is known as your five senses. See it, hear it, feel it, smell it, or taste it. But even that's incorrect, because at the last count, at the last research, we've discovered you have around about 21 or 22 senses. But historically, we only think about the five senses that brings all the information into your brain. Now, also, those senses are pretty awful. I know you think they're wonderful. I know you think that you can hear and you can see me and touch me if you were here. I don't know about smelling or tasting. I might let you smell, but I don't particularly want you to have a little nibble at me. That probably won't be very pleasant. But in fact, these senses are very restrictive. If you just take the sense of sight, we're very much restricted between infrared and ultraviolet. That's the only things we can see. And believe it or not, the actual thing that you can see very clearly, or what's known as your foveal vision, is only about the size of your thumbnail held at a distance. Everything else is rather hazy. But your brain is very clever because it takes lots of pictures, that's why your eyes look all over the place, and puts them together in one nice picture that we can understand. But just carrying on, I could say I could speak for hours, I'm just watching the time, just carrying on from this, you see. Also, the things you see, you can only see what you already know. Now, that's a bit of a bold statement, isn't it? You can only see what you already know. If you don't know something and you don't recognize something, or it makes no sense to you, you tend not to see it. This is why in the development of the brain, let me just very quickly go through this. A baby is born with approximately 80 billion neurons. These are the little chemical and electrical charge things that go on inside your head. But when that baby is born, there's no connections between these neurons. No connections. So the baby, when the baby is first born, it thinks that everything is an extension of itself. And as it begins to develop, the pathways, as we call them, the connections from one neuron to another neuron are slowly made. And this way that all these neurons are made and connected together is what turns out to be your personality or your understanding or your knowledge. And that is, of course, different from every person to every person. We all have different connections inside our head. But most of the time, we only recognize things that we've already been told what they are. So it's more perceiving outwards rather than perceiving inwards. This is just, I'm just talking about our eyes. I haven't got time to talk about all the senses, but the eyes is a very good starting point. Our eyesight is also very bad if you compare it to, say, an eagle or a hawk, who at 2,000 feet up, you would have trouble seeing, and yet that eagle or hawk can see that tiny little mouse running around by your feet. And not only that, he can dive from 2,000 feet and get it. We don't quite know how that works yet. So just looking at our input from our eyes, it's not as grandiose as we think it is. Now, I won't have time to talk all about all the other senses, but we do have some mechanism inside our head. And I have to tell you right from the start here that we know more about the universe than we do about the workings of the brain. It seems most people think it a little unethical to chop the top of your head off while you're alive and start poking around to see what each bit of the brain does. And so over the years, we've built up lots of ideas and stories about the brain that actually are now known not to be true. And I'll just finish on a couple of these for you. One of them, one of the famous ones that still seems to linger, is the left brain and the right brain. There is no difference between the left side and your right side. Your brain, each part of your brain can do everything the other part can do. We know that from when people have accidents to one hemisphere, the other hemisphere takes over the workings. We don't really know why some people are more artistic and some people are more with their hands, engineering and so on. And so we use this metaphor of left and right brain, and it's still taught in some schools, I've noticed, but there is actually no science that connects with that. And the last one I might talk about briefly is this multitasking. The brain cannot multitask. It does one thing and one thing at a time. Now, if you do one thing and switch to something else and switch to something else, if you want a definitive test of that, which you can do yourself, get 2 pens and the pieces of paper. In your right hand, write your first name, and in your left hand, write your surname at the same time. Unless they happen to be the same name, which is easy to do. If it's different, you can't do it. And that's because the brain works wonderfully well when it's working on one thing and one thing alone. And this is something that I know most of you are in the public speaking area, and by concentrating on what you're going to be speaking on and ignoring everything else is how that you can speak fluently and effectively on any subject. Now that takes up my 15 minutes already, would you believe? And I only got as far as the eyes. So we'll have to talk about the rest of your senses at some other time. Thank you. Thank you, Guru.
Wow, Dr. David, thank you so much. And 15 minutes got, over so early. I mean, I would love to know more. I have a small question from you. Maybe it can take 2-3 more minutes. So can you share any of your personal experience with your mind? You must have manifested or did some sort of experiments with it already. And I can see you've got loads of experience and loads of success stories. We would love to know any of your success stories with respect to, all these things which you have shared, amazing insights. Yeah.
Well, I think, first of all, answering your earlier question about wanting to know more, you can come and join some of our NLP classes. And if you want to find out about those, just search my name and it'll come up. So that's easy enough, or NLP India, one word, nlpindia.net. Now, as far as experiences are concerned, yes, I mean, we've all had stories about what's gone on with our brain, all of us. Some of us may have had some incidents created by some form of substances of some description. Every substance you take in your body, including water, every substance you take into your body will affect your brain in some extent or another, whether it be caffeine from coffee, whether it be tea, or it will become other substances that we probably shouldn't talk about on this program. But all of those substances, both legal and illegal, do, of course, affect your brain. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but Bruce Lee, you've probably heard of him, he actually died from a reaction to a simple aspirin. So everything that you take will affect your body as well as your brain. Now, the thing about the brain that complicates everything is that we don't really know how it works. But we do know that you can train it and teach it, or what we call in NLP as reprogramming it, because the brain likes to just do things automatically. You learn something, it does it, it keeps doing it, and it just keeps doing it. A quick example, tying your shoelaces. You have to learn how to do those shoelaces as a young child. And then for the rest of your days, you can tie your shoelaces. You don't have to think about it. And of course, riding a bike, because I know our friend here is a bike rider. You don't have to relearn how to ride a bike all the time. It's there. So the way you do things are through the programs that your brain has worked on for you. And if it's correct, you'll carry on doing that all your life. The problem comes is that life itself changes. Things are not the same today as they were even a year ago, as we know how so many of us have had to do a drastic change over this last year, forced upon us through circumstances beyond our control. And I hope that most of you have been able to succeed quite well during this year by changing the way you do things, altering the programs in your head. And if you have, congratulations, you've used your brain correctly. But if you haven't, and if you're one of the people that are saying, oh dear, when this is ever going to end, I'm getting terribly bad and upset, then you haven't been using your brain properly. I just finish you with this thought. People say lots of people have lost money over the last year because of the situation. Let me tell you this, there's no such thing as losing money. If you've lost money, somebody else has gained it. It's as simple as that. It's just a redistribution of wealth. And I'll just finish you on one last fact for you to ponder on, and that is this. There is no such thing as good or bad, as right or wrong. Nothing. It just exists. Whatever it is, it just exists. You make it right or wrong for you. So if we just look at the last year, a lot of us will say the last year was terrible, but there are people who say the last year was fantastic and I want to have another one the same because I'm making so much money and enjoying life so fantastically. It's up to you, your brain. You decide whether something is right or wrong. In NLP terms, we say, is it useful or not useful? That's it. If it's not useful for you, it's definitely useful for somebody else. Think about that.
Wow, super awesome, Dr. David. This is amazing. I'm glad that I was asking this question and we really got an amazing insight. So we have one last question from the audience. Mr. Aniket wanted to know if NLP can help kids in the exams.
The quick answer to that is yes. And the longer answer is that anything will help children in their exams. Well, I run a whole program on parenting for children, but basically you have to enter the child's world to help him enjoy doing what the child wants to do. And if the child enjoys the subject, they'll pass the exam. Unfortunately, in our schooling system, where we have maybe 30 or more children in a classroom, the teacher cannot give individual help to the child. And so sometimes in some subjects, the child falls behind. And that's where the parent's job is to increase that child's knowledge. Because an exam is only a test of the knowledge you've got in your head. And if you haven't got the knowledge in your head, you won't pass an exam. Full stop. Nothing will help you pass that exam. Now, if you've got the knowledge in your head, then we have some techniques that will help you be calm and calm down and concentrate, etc. But first of all, knowledge in. Get the knowledge in. Okay, hope that answers the question for you.
Lovely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. David. And you really made the day, man. I'm really glad that I'm able to, I'm one of the chosen one today that I'm listening to you live, and this is so awesome. And I'm sure Sherry Bhai would agree on this thing, that life is also like an exam, and NLP is, I'm sure, gonna help in various ways. So yeah. Over to you, after Sherry.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you for your wonderful energy. In fact, I was just expecting some more goosebumps to happen, but unfortunately the clock does not support it much. But the way session was going on, it surely uplifted the spirits of everybody. And I just wanted to say that we want to listen more, David. We surely want to have a 1 hour training session. We really want you to deliver a training session to the entire community and tell us some program for all the community members, because we have our Thursday training session series. I really look forward for your acknowledgement and yes for that, because I think there were a lot of things which you wanted to share, but due to time constant, you could not. Secondly, I'm curious to know why NLP for you in your life. I mean, there are so many things. So many wonderful things are happening to wonderful people around the world.
Exactly.
But why you chose NLP?
We need several hours for that. Several hours. And you know,
Okay.
I started on this over 25 years ago, so a lot of time has taken place. I'll
All right.
put my connection in the chat for you. Somebody's asked in the
Sure.
chat.
Sure. And we can have some personal call also sometime, maybe whenever you are free. I would love to have your insights on that. By the way, I have also followed books of Joe Silva. I'm sure you've heard about it.
The Silva method, yes.
Yeah, the Silva
He
method.
is Spanish guy. Yeah.
He's a Spanish guy. So I think the legacy should continue no matter what people contribute and what people think, and which soul to be picked by God to make sure that something is happening good for the entire universe. And thank you for contribution, the kind of contribution you are making. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you for coming to PSI community and enlightening all of us and making us feel more confident about our mindset today. Thank you very much, Dr. David Lincoln. Over to you, Gaurav.